Okay, so in today's quick topic, we're going to be talking about what happened to the middle class. And I make at least under 100K, at least a little bit under 100K a year. And today we're going to be getting to like the nitty gritty of like what truly happened to people who feel like they're in the middle class. Let's get into it.
Most people think they are middle class, but most are not, and that's costing them a lot of money. The society-wide problem is made even worse because nobody knows what the fuck middle class even means anymore.
I feel like you're really just in between a rock and a hard place. You're in a spot where everyone's like, hey, you're doing better than, low class. You're doing great.
The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their home and then redistributed all across the world.
I always like to tell people, what does even middle class even mean? Like, does that mean you're the working class? Does that mean you're making a certain level of income? To me, it's like every time people thought this, oh, middle class, I always like to ask myself, like, does that even exist anymore?
He's trying to tell us he cares about the middle class. Give me a break. That's a bunch of malarkey.
And you're underneath the people who are actually doing fine.
You probably think middle class is what most people think middle class is. Not rich, but not poor. A middle class family can afford a regular home with a 30-year mortgage, 2 cars, and a vacation once a year. A middle class family has 2 people that work in middle management or run a
I could safely say I am a single man working one job, 70 hours a week, making at least a little bit under 100K a year, and I could safely say that I am doing fairly okay. Fairly okay.
small business. If they are lucky, you might imagine that one of the pair could stay home to look after the children. The middle class describes the largest share of people on the wealth spectrum slotted between the extremely wealthy and the working class. But you would find it impossible to give a net worth figure that is the cutoff for entry into any of these classes. There are 3 reasons why you are not middle class, and 3 reasons why this relevant definition is hurting your real financial situation. The first reason you are not middle class is because that term really doesn't mean anything anymore.
I was at a seminar recently where somebody literally said, there is no middle class anymore.
I kind of agree. When I tell people how much money I make, they look at me like, oh, I'm supposed to be this content person who kind of like should be content with just everything I have. But the truth of the matter is, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for what I have. But the truth of the matter is, I generally don't think I'm any more better than making 40 or 50K a year.
The middle class is gone.
The middle class was first used in early modern Europe to describe the middling people that were not nobility but not peasants either. They were wealthy merchants or factory owners. If you don't own a factory or a fleet of trade ships, you already fall outside the original definition of the middle class. Today, these people would be considered upper class, especially in America where we rejected the idea of nobility. The middle class is a changing classification, and that change is usually decided by the upper class.
And so I want to really pay attention to this graph because I think this is what from 1970 to 1920. And this actually just shows like middle class is somewhat in between 59K and 90K. And I think in 2020, it kind of raised to 90K. I'm not too sure what it looks like now in 2025. I'm pretty sure this number drastically increased, but I really want y'all to pay attention to like, this is what considered middle class is. You're considered like within this income range right here.
In early modern Europe, the nobles needed a way to class people that were as wealthy as they were, but not considered as important. Today, the middle class describes people that aren't nearly as rich as the upper class, which is the old middle class, but also aren't poor. It's a definition so broad that it's practically useless, but it has changed a lot in a short span of time. Homer Simpson was once portrayed as a working class man. The show has a rigid adherence to episodic continuity, so the family has not changed at all in 33 years the show has been on air. The show may not have changed, but the world around it has, and slowly the Simpsons family became middle class, then upper middle class. And today, with their single family home, 3 children, 2 cars, and a stay-at-home wife, they could be considered upper class.
I don't know which I love more, being rich or hiding it from my husband.
The definition may be meaningless, but it's not useless. Everybody
And this is really something we have to pay attention to because if we look at these old shows and we look at like Family Guy, The Simpsons, all these shows we used to watch, it used to always be a scenario where it's to be a bumbling idiot working a regular job, paying for like the cars, the house, the mother to stay at home. And I really want to emphasize a point of, even when we look at these shows that's still going on to this day, it's like they don't even show that no more. They don't even show a lifestyle where it's that simple anymore.
Everybody from companies to politicians target the middle class as the largest block of customers and voters.
This really will mostly benefit the middle class and jobs.
You probably like to think you are middle class even if you are not. People will place themselves into this group and accept that something that's good for the middle class is good for them. This is a very useful trait when chasing votes or marketing a product.
To middle-class Americans.
That's all for the middle class.
A middle-class tax cut.
America's middle class is getting hollowed out.
Until middle-class incomes are going up.
A system for classifying people based on their wealth that has remained consistent over time is simply dividing people into two groups, the working class and the upper class. The first group are people that need to work to pay their living expenses, the working class. The second group is those that don't need to work because they have enough income from investments or other payments. According to this definition, a doctor that still needs to work to pay the mortgage on their
I kind of agree with this. I kind of agree with the fact that when we look at like classification of like people in America, we really have to understand that we have people who don't work, we have people who do work, and we have people who allow their income to work for them. And I really feel like it falls under those three categories. I feel like when they say middle class, it's generally the people that work for these corporations, work for these businesses, the people that kind of run the country itself.
bedroom McMansion is working class, but a retiree living on a pension would be upper class. The definitions are simpler, but the outcome is just as blurry. None of this would even matter if it wasn't costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your career, and that's not hyperbole. So it's time to learn how money works.
Wait, hold on. Let's run that one back just a little bit.
On their 7-bedroom McMansion is working class, but a retiree living on a pension would be upper class. The definitions are simpler, but the outcome is just as blurry. None of this would even matter if it wasn't costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your career, and that's not hyperbole. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why social classes are stupid and only kept around as a useful tool to sell you stuff. The first problem with assuming you are middle class comes from the inherent spending and saving patterns it motivates. According to a study published by Bankrate, a financial services comparison and publishing company, 57% of Americans could not cover an unexpected $1,000 expense without taking on debt or selling.
I agree. I genuinely agree with this because I think I've seen this other statistic that was like on the average day, the average person encounters 500 to 600 ads, at least 500 to 600, maybe even more at this point, due to the cell phone and due to all the advertisements and social media platforms that we see. And I really want to emphasize this point of, if there's an emergency that ends up coming up, no one would even know how to pay for these things.
Something.
People were being forced to borrow from retirement savings, take out a personal loan, put things on a credit card.
This study is published every year, and the number of Americans in such a fragile financial situation has been slowly climbing, even though the $1,000 is worth less than when the report was first produced. Even if your definition of middle class is different from all of the other definitions, we can all agree that having less than $1,000 in savings is not a trait associated with the middle class. A Gallup poll found that a majority of Americans still identify as middle class, which means that there is an overlap of people that can't afford a $1,000 expense but still consider themselves middle class. The idea of what a middle class American looks like is both the cause and effect of this. A survey conducted by Lending Club found that 36% of people earning at least $250,000 a year were living paycheck to paycheck.
We've struggled. I mean, we've gone from...
I think it wasn't until I made an extra 20-30K of my income, but even now, making at least under 100K, I could safely say that there are some bills that I simply just cannot pay for as at the moment. And I'm a single man with no kids and no girlfriend. And I really want y'all to emphasize that point of why as Americans we have to live paycheck to paycheck. Does that make sense logically?
Having money in the bank, having savings, to living paycheck to paycheck and basically trying to make ends meet, and sometimes they don't meet.
That income by most people's standards would put those people securely into the upper middle class, but they were still dealing with financial stress. A significant contributor to this financial stress was maintaining the image that people had of what an upper middle class lifestyle should look like.
With the Joneses.
2 cars, a well-furnished single-family home, and regular vacations are all part of an upper middle class income starter pack. But they are unaffordable in a lot of the areas that people work to make these high salaries. Here in San Francisco, that income would responsibly get you a 1-bedroom apartment and a basic car that you need to pay to keep locked up so that it doesn't get broken into. Those living conditions don't feel middle class though. So people overextend themselves because they think that if they earn what they think is a middle income salary, they should have a middle income lifestyle. This lifestyle assumption is the second way that thinking you are middle class is hurting your real financial situation. It makes you less likely to pick the right.
And I really do think that financial freedom isn't about just simply making a certain level of income. What I really think it comes down to, I think it comes down to freedom. Freedom, and it comes down to flexibility. Me personally, if you're making 300K a year and you have 250K in expenses, but you're making like, or versus like you making 100K, but you have only 20K in expenses, that basically tells me the person who's making 100K has less expenses, has more freedom, and has more financial freedom than a person with almost $250,000 in bills every month compared to making 300K a year.
Right job. Some of the best job opportunities in America right now are roles that people associate with the working class. Trade jobs, trucking, farming, and oil work can all make more.
That's basically me right there. Trucking, 90K. You see, it basically has my income correct. 90K a year. Perhaps that, yes.
More money than most white-collar jobs in an office. A lot of young people dismiss these careers as something they would only consider if they didn't make it into college, because they don't want to be working class even though they can make a lot more money and take on less debt pursuing one of these options.
Skilled laborers become more and more scarce, companies will become more desperate and out of necessity pay more. Also, the longer that you work in the trades, the more money you tend to make.
There are pros and cons to white-collar professional work and blue-collar trade jobs, but working your way up a corporate ladder is not as guaranteed.
And I even have friends, a lot of friends who finish college, and I really want to emphasize that it is getting completely way more competitive out there. If I'm starting to realize something when it comes to these corporations and all these big businesses, I'm realizing that they're trying to go after people with less qualifications and willing to do the work for longer and for more hours. And the thing is, it's really just getting more and more competitive out there, even with a college degree.
Guaranteed as putting in some high-paying hours with a good trade. But too often, it's dismissed because people think they are better than that, when really, they are probably not. And that's because of the second reason you are not middle class. In a throwback to European nobility, that status is becoming hereditary. According to studies published by Georgetown University, Pew Research, and Harvard Business Review, the biggest predictor that a child will have financial stability in their adult lives is not their academic ability, but the wealth of their parents. Wealthier parents can provide better opportunities and remove financial burdens like paying out of pocket for college or saving for the down payment on a first home. Children of wealthier parents also have soft benefits that, according to research, can make a big difference. Just being surrounded by social networks of people that are also financially stable means that wealthier children are more likely to know the basics of building credit, saving for long-term financial goals, and avoiding common financial mistakes. Certain social studies have argued that this advantage goes even further. Children of wealthier parents have less to prove and are therefore less likely to spend recklessly on conspicuous consumption.
I agree with this. I actually agree with this 100%.
And they are given learned social skills that help them perform well in a professional environment. Even if the child of wealthy parents doesn't end up in a high-paying career, they can still end up significantly ahead of those that do. Children from poorer households that break the cycle and earn a middle or upper middle class income are still going to need to catch up financially. These children will need to pay their own way through college by taking out student.
I do hate to say, but the unrealistic reality is that if you're not really born out of wealthy parents, you kind of do have to figure it out on your own. And people who kind of have like a better advantage to other people are usually people where they come from wealthier households, because it's not really necessarily the wealth itself that gives you the upper hand. It's really the knowledge of like what to do, the steps to take, the path that you should go down. And it really comes down to understanding the knowledge.
Loans. They will need to buy their own car, build their own credit, save for their own down payment, and they will also be under more pressure to help improve the financial situation of their family. These people are overrepresented in the same group of high-income earners with very low financial security, and that's what causes the third problem with thinking you are middle class. It will make you take unnecessary risks. If people who believe they are middle class can't afford the trappings of what they consider a normal middle class lifestyle to look like, they might take on debt to keep up or look at risky alternatives to make money. Which group of people do you think are most likely to fall for financial scams? If you are brave enough, put your answer in the comment section so we can all make fun of you for being wrong.